You're watching Oilers Nation Everyday with Tyler Yaremchuk. Your one-stop shop for all things Oilers.
Welcome in to a new edition of Oilers Nation Everyday. It's a Sherwood Ford Giant game day, but it's not a normal episode because if you're listening to this, you're probably like looking at your phone being like, wait, I downloaded an episode of Canucks Conversation. We're doing a joint crossover episode. Quads, what's up?
Not much. I'm excited to do this. I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of Canucks fans who are like, oh my gosh, I have to listen to an Oilers guy talk, and there's going to be a lot of Oilers guys saying, oh my gosh, a Canucks reporter talking to me. I don't want to hear about this, but we're going to do our best to make it as unbiased and informational as possible.
Yeah, it'll be really good. We got a couple of questions that we ran past each other. We're going to try to preview this as best we can because it's November 8th. And from an Oilers perspective, man, it's like a weirdly big game. They lost to Vegas earlier in the week. Things aren't going well, but they're somehow still 6-7-1 for the Vancouver Canucks on that side of things. Tonight's a chance for the Canucks to win their fourth game in a row. I guess let me just start there. What's been sort of the biggest positive, or what's been fueling this little 3-game heater for the Canucks side?
Well, it's certainly been Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes has just been phenomenal. He's been great all season long, but especially against the LA Kings, he really took over. That was a game that he really put his stamp on. Not to mention the win over the Ducks, but again, it was the Anaheim Ducks, so it's hard to take a victory lap on that one. They took care of business though, and I think that's the big thing. This is the first time in their 15 years that they've had these 3 California teams that the Canucks have swept the California road trip. So they're riding high right now, and honestly, Kevin Lankinen's been a big story for the Canucks all season long. He was instrumental in it, but Tyler, you talked about how this is a big game for the Oilers. From the Canucks perspective, this is a big one because they've had their own issues all season long, and the record's fine because they've gotten the goaltending. Kevin Lankinen's been phenomenal. I think he's top 5 in the league in save percentage right now. He's been no joke. He's been a huge revelation for this team. He's the reason they have points and the reason they got points early on in the season. But while that was happening, the Canucks were giving up a ton of chances off the rush, and they were trying to create more rush offense themselves. So that's going to allow your opposition to do the same against you and leave you susceptible to some odd man rushes. But it was really bad against San Jose Sharks. They almost lost that game. I know the scoreboard maybe didn't show that they almost lost that game, but they did almost lose that game. It almost went to overtime. That was a lot closer than I think anybody wanted to see the Canucks go with the San Jose Sharks, and it was after that game. Again, it was the Ducks, so it was hard to read into it too much, but notably, they cleaned up the defensive game in front of their goaltender. LA was their first real test. The schedule's been pretty soft for the Canucks so far this year, but LA was the first real test, and they just defended LA so well. That was the best game I think the Canucks have played all season long, so they're riding high right now, and Quinn Hughes is a big reason why.
Man, yeah, 7-2-1 in their last 10, 7-2-3 on the season. The Kevin Lankinen thing is fascinating, and I know we'll talk about injuries. We'll talk about the other offseason ads in a second, but Kevin Lankinen basically picked up off the scrap heap right at the end of free agency. He was looking for a home. Can you imagine where this Canucks team would be, though, if they were you know what? Let's cross our fingers with Seelovs and Yuri Patera, and let's see where this goes. It could have gotten ugly.
It almost did get ugly, Tyler. We were at training camp, and we were looking at it, and you'll recall, it was Patera and Shelovs to start training camp. And we were like, oh my gosh, I know it's training camp and these drills aren't made for goalies to look good, but there's a lot of pucks beating these guys. There's a lot of pucks that are ending up in the back of the nets here. So it was evident goaltending was not going to be something that the Canucks could joke around with the severity and the just the unknown with Thatcher Demko and his injury. So they needed to go out and get Kevin Lankinen. In the end, Kevin Lankinen needed the Canucks almost as much as they needed him. So it was a good marriage in the end. But it is scary to imagine what the season would look like if they didn't go out and sign Kevin Lankinen.
Quinn Hughes, Kevin Lankinen, both great positive surprises on the Canucks side of things. And I was trying to think about what's been the biggest positive surprise from an Oilers perspective here. And honestly, they're 6-7-1, which is miles better than they were last season. November 8th was the anniversary of them sending Jack Campbell to the minors and basically ending his time as an Oiler. They bring up Calvin Pickard. November 9th, the game day today, is the anniversary of their loss to the San Jose Sharks, which ended up ending Jay Woodcroft's time here. I know he got one more game, but there's that image or that video of him and Dave Manson walking off the ice, and they mouth something to each other along the lines of like, this is it. And it's like, yep. And it ended up being it for them. But right now for the Oilers, even though they're not 2-9-1 like they were a year ago today, they're 6-7-1. They're barely below 500. They can be back to 500 with a victory tonight. But like, man, Connor McDavid is under a point per game and he's missed some time. Leon Draisaitl has been great, but he has scored basically all of the offense because Zach Hyman was snake bit. Arvidsson's been relatively snake bit. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has been playing that well. Evan Bouchard has been struggling to get pucks through. Like Jason Gregor tweeted, he's on pace to set the NHL record for most shot attempts blocked in a season, and it won't even be close. It'll be by like 28 shot attempts. So there's not a lot of good going on in Edmonton. And what's interesting is that, again, you kind of talked that like things could have gotten ugly in Vancouver, and Oilers fans are probably listening to this being like, seriously, the dude who covers a team that's 7-2-3 is saying things could have gotten ugly. But to flip this onto a bit more of a negative path, I suppose, and I'll talk about the Oilers' negative stuff in a second here. What hasn't been working for the Canucks? I mean, you talked about Lankinen. That's obviously a big check, but like this is a team that looked so complete at the out of the gates last season. What's different?
Well, the power play is not doing very well. So that's, again, and I think that's a positive for Canucks fans at this juncture, is that it's starting to look a little more like itself. Obviously, there's the injury to Brock Besser. That's a huge disappointment if they lose Brock Besser. But in terms of like on-ice play and things that the Canucks can control, the power play, it hasn't been good enough, and squarely in that, Elias Pettersson's struggles need to be talked about. The point totals aren't there. Basically what he's putting in right now, he was great last night against the LA Kings, on Thursday night. He was great against the LA Kings, shutting down the Anze Kopitar line. He was instrumental in why the Canucks didn't give up much defensively. But you're not paying him to keep the other opposition in check. Like, you're paying him to put up points, and he just hasn't done that this year. So undoubtedly, similar to last year, Elias Pettersson's been the biggest disappointment of the Canucks season early on. I think without a shadow of a doubt.
So what's confusing for me from an outsider perspective is, one, how long this dry spell has lasted, but it feels like every time I go load up daily face-off and I look at the line combos for the Canucks, it's like, oh, there's a different third member of that line with Elias Pettersson. I'm looking right now at Natural Stat Trick, and it's like, okay, he's played 62 minutes with Hoglander. He's played 40 minutes with DeBrusk. He's played 25 minutes with Arshdeep Bains, 24 with Pius Suter, 18 with Sprong. Like, you can keep going down through some other guys. Who's the best fit there? And is the blender working? Because Oilers fans hate the blender. I mean, Chris Knobloch has been mixing up his lines like crazy. It drives people nuts because it's the argument of consistency can create chemistry. Do the Canucks need to find a consistent third member? And is there anyone that you think works best on that Pettersson line?
Well, so it's Connor Garland is the fit, right? Like, Connor Garland is going to stay on that line. He's been phenomenal for them. He's been the best player on that line. He's been the best player that the Canucks have, not named Quinn Hughes, on basically every night this season. Connor Garland's been phenomenal. If Hughes and Lankinen are 1 and 2 in terms of positive stories, Connor Garland is undoubtedly number 3. So you have that locked down, and you're assuming that when Dakota Joshua comes back, obviously he had the testicle cancer diagnosis and subsequent surgery that he's recovering from. He's coming back this week. I don't know if he'll get in against Edmonton, but he is going to be back in the near future. Do you put him on with that line immediately? Because I think so. You've seen what him and Garland can do together. Maybe with Elias Pettersson as their center, they're able to do even more. So I would assume it's him. The really interesting wrinkle for me, Tyler, is that with Brock Besser going down, it sounds like he has a concussion that he's going to be out for at least a week. Jonathan Lekkerimäki is scoring and he's shooting a ton at the AHL level. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a look as that third guy on that line. You need him to play top 6 minutes. I don't want to see him bouncing up and down the lineup, kind of like what the Canucks did with Vasily Podkolzin when he was a prospect with them. You want to see Jonathan Lekkerimäki get that opportunity. I think he's going to get called up, and I think he's going to get a shot, not with JT Miller. I think it'll actually be Pius Suter that moves up with JT Miller, and it'll be Jonathan Lekkerimäki that gets the look with Elias Pettersson. So who's the answer? I think long-term it's probably Dakota Joshua, but right now, I think it could be another new name that you haven't even mentioned yet with Lekkerimäki. So, I don't know about right now, but I think in the near future and long term, it's probably Dakota Joshua.
For the Oilers, in terms of what's been disappointing, it's weird to say this because, again, it's the Oilers, usually known for that high-powered offense, but there's only one team in the league scoring less than them on a goal per game basis, and it's the Anaheim Ducks. Like, Edmonton's offense is 31st. If you would have told the average Oilers fan back when the season started, hey, the team's going to be 31st in scoring, they probably would have been like, oh boy, we're 2-9-1 again, because there were question marks like there is early in the year about the goaltending, and there was major question marks about the blue line and what was going on the right side there. But when you go look at the numbers, they've actually been preventing chances, shots, Corsi, whatever, however you want to dice up chances. They've been preventing at a better clip than most teams in the league. They're like top 5 in a lot of those metrics. They can't score quads. Like, this Oilers team cannot find the back of the net. Their penalty kill is 32nd. Their power play, I think, is 31st right now as well. So at 5-on-5, they're actually getting like above league average save percentage from both, or from Pickard and Skinner combined. There's been some tough nights, but like, the goaltending sound or looks worse than it is because they're awful on the penalty kill. Calvin Pickard has a 600 save percentage when the Oilers are shorthanded. How do you like? That's if a team had a beer league goalie who was doing that, they would take him out back or into the parking lot and run him over with a car. Like, it's crazy to look at this Oilers team be as inept offensively as they've been. Connor McDavid was hurt, yes, but he only missed 3 games. He's under a point per game. Leon Draisaitl has 9 goals, and Brett Kulak is tied for second on the team in goals with 3. Like, they can't score. It's wild because...
So you have your pulse on the market, and sorry to interrupt you, but you have your pulse on the market obviously better than I possibly could. Like, what's the vibe then? Because to me, like, you telling me those numbers, we know the Oilers offense isn't going to be as bad as the Anaheim Ducks. Like, Ducks fans are looking at that and saying, oh yeah, that's about right. But we know that's not going to be the case for the Oilers, especially that power play. It was a coin flip power play at times last year, especially in the playoffs as well. Like, is that the vibe in Edmonton right now that, okay, it's going to turn around?
It's almost like people aren't understanding or like can't come to fathom that the offense is as bad, so they're pointing blame everywhere else. Like, I still have people in the chat for the live show being like, they need to go get a top 4 defenseman, and it's like, well, no, hold up. They're actually preventing chances fine. Like, the blue line hasn't really been that big of an issue. When there are mistakes, they're like grade A mistakes that directly result to a goal. The goaltending's been above average at 5-on-5. On the penalty kill, it's bad. It's just with the Oilers of the past, when they were struggling defensively and when they were struggling in the goaltending department, a lot of times their special teams and their offense would just mask it, and it'd be like, oh, they're fine. They're just going to outscore their problems. And right now we're seeing what happens when every part of your game's average, but the offense is below average. So people are frustrated because they're not finishing their chances. I still sit there like, they have the 30th ranked shooting percentage in the league at 5-on-5. It's not like this Oilers team magically forgot how to score. What will be concerning for me is if the offense wakes up and it comes at a time as the blue line starts to falter a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're almost right back where you were, struggling to win hockey games. So the challenge for the Oilers here will be, like, everyone knows the power play is going to get heat up at some point. It's going to go on a 2-3 week run where it's 50%. Everyone knows Connor McDavid is going to have a run at some point where in 10 games he puts up like 27 points and everyone's like, oh my God, it's Connor McDavid's league, and everyone else is secondary. Like, that's going to come. But if it comes as everything else kind of falls down a little bit, then the Oilers might be in a little bit of trouble. But also, Stuart Skinner has not been good to start the year, and he was not good the year before to start. And what does he always seem to do in like December, January, February? He turns on the Jets and he plays unbelievable hockey, and then the Oilers win a bunch of games. So, like, I'm not concerned because I look at things like shooting percentage and the fact that they're top 5 in a lot of 5-on-5 stats and their power play is awful. And I'm like, all those things are going to change. But I do think there is like a weird, decent amount of panic in the market right now, which is again, I think it's confusing because I still think this Oilers team is going to be fine. But even I'm starting to hesitate a bit. I'm letting the naysayers get in my head.
Okay, you mentioned a top 4 defenseman there. Evan Bouchard, what's going on with him? I saw the highlights. He was responsible for 2 of those goals against Vegas. Puck watching, that seems out of the ordinary for him. Like, explain to me what's going on with Evan Bouchard this year.
He had a play in the season opening game where he got kind of his pocket picked at the offensive blue line by Mark Scheifele, and Scheifele had a breakaway, and Bouchard just watched him the whole way. He took like 3 hard strides and was like, I'm good. And it's weird because, listen, he's been knocked in the past for like not being an overly intense defenseman, and he plays such a laid back, like kicking his feet up in the lazy boy style of game that it drives people nuts. But that game against Vegas was really bad. And going back to last year, you always kind of lived with a couple of Bouchard gaffes every now and then, because it was like, he's putting up 82 points. He's getting 2 to 4 shots on goal a game. He's scoring a bunch. The power play is great. It's like he provided so much value offensively that even if he was a touch negative on the D side, it's like, look how much you're getting. Well, he's not getting pucks through. He's not putting up the points he did last season. The power play stinks. And he seems to have taken somehow a step back defensively. It's almost like a baseball player, and we're both big baseball guys. You have a great glove first shortstop, and they're struggling at the plate, and all of a sudden the defense starts to suck too, and you're like, whoa, you're bringing the bat with you onto the field. And Bouchard's like the flip side of it a little bit, where it's like, you're supposed to live with the bad defense because you're getting this home run hitter of an offensive player, and now he's striking out every shift, and the defense stinks, and it's like, the fan base is on him, man. Like, Darnell Nurse is almost sitting there going, whew, thank God he's making those gaffes, because now everyone's not on Darnell Nurse as much because Evan Bouchard is public enemy number 1. But even that, it's like, he's a good defenseman. Like, that's got to change at some point, you would imagine. But
and
it's
I mean,
one of the many things.
There were similar struggles last year too, right? Around this time of year. So, okay, we'll see.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting too, is like Oilers fans who are hitting the panic button, and it's not all of them. I keep sitting there and kind of being like, I saw tweets the other day after they lost to Vegas being like, this Oilers team is nothing more than mediocre. And it's like, did you not all watch last year where they did this way worse? It was awful, 10 times worse than this, and they turned it around. But again, the last thing you want to do is drop back-to-back divisional games. So let's talk a little bit more about tonight's game. Last time the Canucks were out, you kind of mentioned it, Brock Boeser, he's not playing tonight, hey, after taking that hit from Tanner Jeannot?
Yeah, sounds like a concussion for Brock Boeser. He's going to be out. It was a dirty hit. I'm sure you saw it. There's a suspension for Jeannot, obviously. And look, like, it's a play where, you know, sometimes those things happen where you're just trying to follow through, or you're just, you know, it just happens. Like, sometimes dirty looking hits happen in hockey, but this was like Jeannot saw that Boeser didn't have his head up, and it wasn't even one of those plays where it's like, oh, you got to have your head up. It's like, Boeser made a play and was skating through the neutral zone. And actually, he did have his head up. He just wasn't looking like behind him, which is where Jeannot actually came from. So it was one of those silly plays where Jeannot just kind of hung his shoulder a bit and was like, oh, I'm just going to make this look accidentally on purpose. And like, he caught him right on the chin. It wasn't even like he could have blown up Boeser. Like, he could have made a huge hit in the neutral zone. Like, he could have gone shoulder to shoulder. He could have gone right through Besser's chest, and he didn't. He chose the chin. Like, he was very aware of what he was doing. It was a cheap shot. It was a dirty play. You don't need to say much more about it than that. But yeah, Boeser not going to be in the lineup tonight.
And still no Thatcher Demko. That's been one, again, not being in the market on a day-to-day. We aren't hearing about it every day, but it feels like this has lingered for a really long time. What's the latest on Demko?
Yeah, so he's practicing now. That's the big step. And now he kind of has that next benchmark of like, they want to see him practice for like a solid 2 weeks, right? So can you do the RVH? I haven't seen it yet. And that's the movement that popped out his knee, right? Like, that's what's given him all this trouble, is a hard RVH into the post. Can he do that? That's still to be seen. Like, he's been practicing with his teammates, but he hasn't been doing that movement. He hasn't been doing his post integrations just yet. So that's the next step for him, and we'll see how the knee holds up. You're wishing the best for Thatcher Demko, obviously, but yeah, it's a slow. It also helps that Kevin Lankin is playing as well as he is, because nobody's rushing him back. The team doesn't want to rush him back. Thatcher Demko doesn't have to rush back, because even though the team wasn't playing well, like, the Canucks haven't found their game yet. LA was probably their first game where, okay, that's what we expect from them in terms of how they played in front of their goaltender. The whole reason they have points to this juncture has been Kevin Lankinen stealing them games. And that's not an exaggeration. Kevin Lankinen has been their best player aside from Quinn Hughes, because Quinn Hughes has been on another level, but Lankinen's stolen them games. Like, he's been phenomenal. He's the reason they have points. So now that the team's starting to find their game, there's even less of a rush for Demko to come back. So it's a nice luxury that the Canucks have, that they don't need to rush Thatcher Demko back. But that's the update on him, is that it's just going to be a few weeks of practicing. And, you know, again, those big movements. Can he do everything that it takes to play as an NHL goaltender?
Speaking of rushing back, it wasn't necessarily the case, but I'm sure there were Canucks fans who, when it was announced McDavid would be out for 2 to 3 weeks, not that you ever cheer an injury, but it's like, Ooh, he's missing that game on Saturday night. Nice. And McDavid, to everyone's surprise, was in the lineup on Wednesday. So they set a 2 to 3 week timeline. He was back basically 8 days after sustaining the injury in Columbus. So McDavid's back, but again, he's looked weirdly pedestrian so far this season. While you're talking about key players and Besser and Demko, the only Oilers injury we have to talk about is Matthias Janmark, who is listed as day-to-day. So he might even play. If he doesn't, one thing that works out for the Oilers is the Condors have a back-to-back game this week, or a back-to-back set in Abbotsford this weekend. So Edmonton sent down Noah Philp and Drake Caggiula the other day, and they might need to recall one of them tomorrow ahead of the game. They might even do it on an emergency basis or whatever to keep the cap gymnastics kind of going. But they literally just got to be like, hey, drive over from Abbey. The puck drops at 8 o'clock in Vancouver. So nothing really that crazy from the Oilers' perspective on the injury front. To wrap things up, Quads, the last area I thought we should hit on, because it has been a while since these two teams have gone head-to-head in a meaningful game. But since that playoff series, there's been some roster turnover. I want to talk about the fresh faces on this Canucks team. And very selfishly, can we start with our boy Vinny? Oilers fans still love him, but his Canucks career's not gone off to a good start.
No, it was a rocky start, Tyler. It was a rocky start for Vinny Desharnais in Vancouver, but he's improved. He's starting to improve, and that's come by playing with Erik Brannstrom. And this is the thing I was talking with our boy Bag Milk a lot about, is that Desharnais' best minutes came when he was playing with Brett Kulak in Edmonton. I'm a huge Brett Kulak fan. Again, a guy who can move the puck and can be really steady for you on the back end. Skate the puck, pass the puck. That's basically what Erik Brannstrom's proven to be able to do as well in Vancouver. So pairing him with Vinny seemed like a no-brainer. And last night against LA was a phenomenal explanation of why you want to have Vinny Desharnais on your team. Threw some good hits, killed penalties really well, anticipated well, got his stick in passing lanes. And then when he's playing at 5-on-5, instead of throwing the puck up the glass and turning it over, which is what he was doing a lot of through his first games as a Canuck, he's just looking wherever Erik Brannstrom is, passing him the puck, and then Brannstrom's the one to wheel it out of the zone, and it's working. So again, Desharnais, really rocky start, but he started to settle down, and really that was the only acquisition that it was looking like wasn't working out. The Canucks pro scouting's been really good since Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford have taken over, but man, like, they have Kiefer Sherwood at $1.5 million. Kiefer Sherwood's leading the league in hits by a wide margin. He's not chasing hits. Like, all of those hits are coming on the forecheck, and most of them are causing turnovers. Kiefer Sherwood's playing hands down the best hockey of his career, but really, like, some of the best hockey we've seen from a third liner in Vancouver in quite some time. And we saw Connor Garland on the third line last year. Kiefer Sherwood's throwing his weight around. He's scoring he's scoring goals from distance. These aren't just lucky goals or anything like that. They're one-timers. They're creating space for himself. Just things we hoped that would happen with Kiefer Sherwood, but weren't sure. And he's lived up to his billing. He's been, other than Lankinen, he's been their best free agent acquisition, especially when you consider the cap hit of $1.5 million for the next 2 years. Like Teddy Bluger as well. He's not a new acquisition, but he's a guy that they extended. And when you look at what a guy like Alex Wenberg got in San Jose, the center market, Bluger probably could have gotten more had he gone on the open market, but he stays in Vancouver at a really, really palatable cap hit. And the Canucks are better off for it. Like, their bottom six has been great this year. And that was the thing that they addressed in the offseason, right? It was like, okay, we need to reshape our forward group because it just wasn't good enough. In the playoffs especially, they got exposed, right? The forward group wasn't deep enough. So really, there's not an offseason acquisition that hasn't really worked out for them. Everybody's kind of, I don't want to say punching above their weight class, but everybody's doing about as well as you would have thought. Even Vinny, after the game against LA, even him can be included in that conversation.
Yeah, we still get Oilers fans being like, they shouldn't have let him walk, To flip it around to the Oilers side of things, it's been a rocky start for a few of the fresh faces in the Oilers lineup. I had probably higher hopes for a guy like Ty Emberson, but again, he's relatively inexperienced as a defenseman. He only played 30-some games last year for the Sharks to start his NHL career. Troy Stecher has been kind of exactly what Troy Stecher always is. I view him as dependable, but Chris Knobloch maybe doesn't have the same trust level in him. The big ads for the Oilers were unsurprisingly up front. Jeff Skinner tough in the D zone. There has been some rough moments with him, but I've actually been really impressed with how willing he's been to go to some of the dirtier areas and go to the front of the net. Like, he's got 3 goals on the season, and a couple of them have been like right in the blue paint. It hasn't been him like firing home laser beam wrist shots, which is what I thought we'd be getting. Also, no one on the team has shot the puck more this year than Jeff Skinner. He is on the 3rd line with Connor Brown and Adam Henrique. And the Oilers have actually shown they like trying to give that trio softer matchups and use them as more of like a 3rd scoring line, and letting the trio of Draisaitl, Arvidsson, and Podkolzin be a bit of a shutdown line, which is interesting. Arvidsson, totally snake bit to start the year. Like, he'll get going. I actually really like the player. He didn't play a ton last year, though, so it's been kind of just tough to watch him try to get the wheels going and get some momentum. But I think the Oilers still have a good player there in Arvidsson. And let's talk about Vasily Podkolzin, Quads. Anytime I post about Podkolzin, I have like 20 Canucks fans in my mentions being like, because what I'm seeing here is a guy who skates hard, is good defensively, who is always seemingly in the right spots in the offensive zone, but he just can't score. And I'm watching him going, well, surely a guy who does this many things right is going to start scoring. And Canucks fans go, we said that for 2 years.
Yeah, look, Vasily Podkolzin, one of the best dudes that I've ever dealt with in my career in terms of like just how he is as a person. You're always rooting for guys like that, rooting for Vasily Podkolzin's success. But yeah, like, he's always kind of been that. You know what? Let me put it this way. He spent his first 2 years with SKA, who's like the top team in the KHL, and he was playing very limited minutes. And when he went over the boards, it was, hey, don't make a mistake or you're not getting any more minutes. So he had that beat into him right after his draft year, basically. And he almost forgot, it seems, like, how to play the game just on his instincts. And that was the thing that Tocchet spoke about a lot. And Patrick Johnson was my co-host on Canucks Convo on Friday, and he talked about this as well. Like, Rick Tocchet was speaking about it and saying, like, I just want him to follow his instincts and, like, play the game. Like, don't be so scared of making a mistake. And really, it sounds like that's the difference. And I know he's skating hard and doing all that. It's not the same. Like, I've watched some Oilers games. It's not the same. Podkolzin is playing better as an Oiler than he did as a Canuck, because as a Canuck, he would be so focused on not making a mistake that he would, like, miss the puck, and that's a mistake in itself, because he's looking at his man, and the puck's loose, and his man beats him to the puck because Podkolzin's looking at his man, not the play. You got to play the game, and right now Podkolzin's playing the game for the Oilers. Like, I've watched some Oilers games, and the forechecking, you're never gonna doubt that from Podkolzin. But he's winning more wall battles than he has. Like, it's one thing to forecheck and be in the right spot, but it's like, okay, what are you doing after that? And he's, not only is he winning the puck, he's winning the puck battle, and then he's making a pass. Like, he's making a play. He's not just winning the puck, chipping it again, and then going to try to win another wall battle. Like, he's making plays with the puck, and ultimately, yeah, you're right. He's not scoring. He's always lacked some finishing ability, but, like, there was a time when Bo Horvat would tell us that he thinks Podkolzin is the hardest shot on the team. Can he start to use that a little bit more? I think so. And I think, look, and I know with all the disappointments that there's been in Edmonton to start the year, I think Podkolzin's been really promising for the Oilers. And I think he has more to give. I think this fresh start was so crucial for him. And I think he's going to give even more than you're seeing from him right now with the Oilers.
It'll be interesting. Former Oiler in the Canucks lineup, former Canuck in the Oilers lineup. It'll be a good game tonight. Let's quickly, key to victory for Vancouver tonight. If they're going to win, what do they got to do well?
Continue to defend. They're starting to defend the rush well. It was a very complete game against LA. Do that again, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I'll say special teams for the Oilers. Again, penalty kill, power play, both right in the bottom 5% of the league. If those two turn around, their 5-on-5 plays actually been really good. If Edmonton can get the special teams going, it should be, I should say, a good night for the Oilers. Quads, this was a lot of fun. I really like this. I'm excited now for the next time these two teams meet.
Absolutely. We're going to do this every time. Looks fun. It's going to be fun.
Do you have socks as part of your backdrop there? Like, those are hockey socks hung up on your wall? What's the deal there?
Okay, so my fiance, Victoria, who you know,
yep.
She got a targeted ad on her Instagram for the Canucks team store sale, and she works downtown, so she passes by the rink, and she was like, oh my gosh, there's socks for $10. I'm going to buy socks. And she didn't really know that these were hockey socks, so she's like, socks, like, she didn't know what she was buying. She was just like, game you socks, that's hilarious. So she bought them. She's like, these will be great for your set. And I was like, okay. So then we got them. And yeah, I was like, they were hockey socks, right? And she's like, no, I didn't. But yes, these are game-used hockey socks. They're an XL. They have a shot block on them. I think they're Ian Cole's. I'm not sure. But I think Tyler Myers wears like a triple XL, so I don't think it's him. Same with Zadorov, so I don't think it's his either. My guess is these are Ian Cole socks that you're seeing behind me.
I like that you did some investigative journalism into whose socks they could be as well. That's great. All right, this was a lot of fun. Shout out to our girl Kennedy as well, who quickly threw together the backdrop here. We got the ONE-CC kind of split look. Shout out to everyone for listening to it as well. It's always fun when these two teams go head to head. Make sure you are subscribed to either YouTube as well. And again, Canucks Conversation Monday through Friday, Oilers Nation Everyday Monday through Friday on the ON YouTube. Enjoy the hockey tonight, everybody, and we'll see you back in your respective shows and YouTubes on Monday.